So I thought a lot about this session and what should be the best way to convey a lot of messages in one short sequence. And what I realized is that oftentimes when I'm asked to speak about something that I care about, I pick one interesting idea and I share that, but then I always feel that I missed something. There's something I didn't get to share, some things that I didn't get to express, and then the questions that come at the end allow me this opportunity to actually answer other things. So what I thought I'm going to do today is basically benefit from that. We named this session AMA, which is short for Ask Me Anything. And what I did is I basically asked people before the session to send me questions, all kinds of topics that you cared about, all kinds of things you find interesting. And I tried to do two things. I tried to take all of those questions and make them into semi-short story that I'll tell you in the beginning about what is neuroscience doing in the last 10 years that's going to change your life in the next 10 years. And then we're going to open it up for any questions that you want. So you're going to give me a chance to talk about any topic afterwards. And I'm going to start by telling you what is the thing that inspired this type of talk for me and the research we do right now on trying to learn what the brain can do that it doesn't do right now. And what it is work I did in Hollywood. So I've been a neuroscientist for the last 12 years. Before I was a neuroscientist, I spent over a decade working as a computer hacker. My job was to break into banks and steal money, very different careers. But since I started my job as a neuroscientist, I also took a mini side job helping filmmakers and TV series writers put science in their films. So you may know it, you may have seen a TV show that has, let's say, a doctor, and he takes the patient and injects some drug into the patient and gives her all kinds of treatments. The writers normally know a lot about the interaction between people. They know very little about the actual drugs. So what they do normally is they write a TV show, and then they contact someone like me, and they say, here's a script for a TV show, there's a little sequence here, put science there. And my job is to invent the science behind the scene to decide what is the drug, what is the disease, what is the solution, and so on. So I've been doing that for a while. Every now and then I will get a script from a writer or a producer, and they say, here's the place you need to put the science. About 3 years ago, in 2016, I was sitting in my place in New York when I got a call from a guy called Mark Kaufman. Mark Kaufman is a writer in Hollywood, and he was famous when he wrote a number of shows that were all science fiction, including one that was actually not science fiction, but still talks about a utopian world that we don't exist in, which is the TV series The West Wing. You may have heard about that. He wrote the last 3 seasons about Washington, D.C. and politics. And at the time when he called me, he was working on a TV show called Limitless. Some of you may know this TV show. It was very popular in 2016. If you don't know it, Limitless is a TV show that's based on a film by the same name. It's based on a book by the same name. It's based on a different book by a different. So there's a book, film, and a TV series. And what's interesting about all of those is that unlike most films and TV series that kind of take the same story and just adapt it in different ways, in this sequence, they actually continue each other. So the first book tells a story. The second book continues where the first book ended. The film starts where the book finishes, and the TV series continues the film. So you actually get a long sequence of stories with a lot of characters. Now, if you know nothing about this TV series, I'll tell you that the premise of it is that there's a world similar to ours. It's just that in this world, there's this magic pill. And if you take this pill, you become smarter. You can use more of your brain. You can have access to most of your memories. You think much more sharply. You can solve problems quicker. A lot of things happen that are great in the few hours where you're under the spell of the pill. And the premise of the TV show was that there's an organization, kind of like the FBI or the police, and they're investigating crimes. And in every episode, there's a crime that they're trying to solve. They can't solve it, and they go to the hero, and the hero takes the pill, and then he becomes smarter, and for the next couple of hours, he's a brilliant scientist or a brilliant researcher or a brilliant detective, and he basically solves the crime. That's pretty much the entire essence of the show. Just that there's one more thing to the show. They also had an arc. And the arc spanned all the episodes. And the idea is that the pill causes the guy all kinds of bad symptoms. And there's some kind of side effects to the drug. And he tries to figure out what are the side effects and how he can stop them. So the entire show leads to the end where he figures out how to stop side effects. And when Mark called me, he said, here's the thing. We already aired 8 episodes of the show. We're building towards the hero finding out to actually stop the pill from having all those bad side effects, but we have no idea how it works. Put science there. So they gave me 5 days. They said, come to Hollywood, take all the stories that we have, the first episode that were aired, the others that were already filmed, the 2 books and the film, and find somehow a solution that solves everything. And I did it. I'm not going to tell you much about it unless you ask me in the Ask Me Anything what was the solution, but I can tell you that I came up with a great solution, and I gave it to them after 5 days, and then I went home, and I waited like everyone else to see how my solution comes in the last episode, and when I watched in December, episode 24, it wasn't there. They just didn't show it, and I called Mark and I said, what's going on? How come my brilliant answer is not there? He said, look, it was so brilliant that we decided to actually postpone the show and put it in season 2. And kind of keep it to the end of season 2, and then they got canceled. So you never get to see it until you ask me now. But the interesting thing was that in the course of these 5 days, I was sitting in Hollywood and trying to find out what could be in theory possible in a world full of science fiction. I actually started reading blogs and fan comments on the show and all kinds of ideas that people had about what would it mean to enhance their brain. What would it mean to have limitless capabilities? And when I went back to the lab after these 5 days, I did what a lot of scientists do, which is I said, could this actually work out? Like, are those ideas totally science fiction, or there's something that we can do with them? There's a saying among scientists that the difference between science fiction and science is timing. And in many ways, this is the case. A lot of things that we saw as kids in Star Trek and Star Wars become things that we build right now in labs. So the last 3 years, for me, were trying to implement some of those ideas that enhance our thinking and make our brain better. And what I wanted to do before we go to the Ask Me Anything is share 3 of the key ideas that I think are new enough that they don't get spoken of enough outside of neuroscientists, that I think will change our lives. And they all come from neuroscience, and they all come from the last 5 years of research. Idea number 1. Memories don't work the way we thought they did. They actually are malleable and they change. Let me explain. The theory about memories for many, many years was that memories are kind of like a vault in our head. We go through an experience, we create a memory for this experience, we store it in our brain, and now it sits there, and every time someone asks us about this event, we can just load this memory, share it, and put it back in the vault. That's how memory works up until the year 2014. In 2014, a small study opened up an entirely different way of looking at memories, which suggests that memories actually are changing after they are inside your head. You go through an event, you get a memory, you store it in your brain. Someone comes to you tomorrow and says, hey, Sam, tell me what you did last night. In order to tell them what you did last night, you have to load the memory from your brain and manifest it by telling it. But what we learned was that as you tell your story, as you use the memory, it actually is floating out there like a bubble, taking information and changing. You know, the iPhone has those icons that kind of rotate. This is how I imagine memories. Once you use them, they're kind of floating, ready for changes, and anything that happens in the real world right now leaks into the memory, and when you're done using the memory, it gets saved again with the new information. It gets rewritten. So every time you tell a story about a memory, you actually open it up and change it a little bit and then resave. Which means that if someone asks you in a week about today, you will tell them a story. But as you tell them the story, you're going to change the story. And if someone asks you in 2 weeks, the version you're going to use isn't the original one. It will be the one that you wrote after the first time you used it. And as you use the memory more and more, you change it more and more. And this is not a bug. This is a feature of the brain. This is what allows our brain to actually keep changing and change our perspective on different memories, particularly bad ones. If you had a bad experience and you go to a therapist, if they're a good therapist, they would ask you a question about the memory, making you load the memory, and once you use the memory, they're going to intervene and maybe give you a different perspective, different angle, different view of the same memory, which you will then store as part of the memory and save it. And when you come back the week after, they're going to load the modified version and modify that again and again. And this is how, after a few meetings, you still remember the essence, but your perspective, your view of that changes. In fact, if it doesn't work, this is a failure of the system that leads to trauma and leads to all kinds of disorders of us reliving memories again and again. So the idea that memories change all the time means a few things. It means that now we know first how they work. It means we can also now start looking at ways to actually retrieve them. You take a person that has a full flaw of memory, like Alzheimer, where they can't access the memories. We can now know how memories are spread in the brain and actually access them, and maybe restore them if the person himself or herself cannot get them. More so, we can start playing with the ideas of transferring the memory from one entity to another. So far, it's only done with mice in experiments, but you can take a mouse that learned how to navigate a maze, take the memory of its navigation of the maze, copy it, and put it in a different mouse, and then a new mouse that never saw the maze somehow knows right away how to navigate that. And what scientists are playing right now is with the idea of actually loading your memories into machines. People talk about living forever. One of the best ways to live forever is to code your story in a way that stays after you. Most of us do it anyhow. We tell our stories to others, we write, we try to create meaning in life, and now scientists are adding one more way of actually storing information the way it was originally by putting it outside your brain. Idea number one. Idea number two. Idea number two that is really critical to how we think about ourselves is something that my colleagues termed sensory addition. That's the name of the field, but it's actually so few people that actually know about it that even the term is not clear. Sensory addition. What's behind this is the idea that we can actually maybe add senses to humans. Meaning, give ourselves more access to the world around us. So when you're born, you're typically born with the 5 senses that you all know of, the sight, audition, so hearing, seeing, smelling, feeling, tasting. Those are the senses that we're all familiar with. But what's important to understand about the brain is that the brain doesn't really see the world. It doesn't really smell the world, doesn't really hear the world. The brain sits in a bony structure, full of water. It's a little colder where the brain is. It's definitely dark there. It doesn't really have access to the real world. So the real world is sampled through our senses. Our eyes can sample photons from the air and turn them into the language of the brain, and then the brain calls this seeing. Our ears turn molecular vibrations into the language of the brain, and then the brain calls it hearing. Same goes with our nostrils and our skin. We have devices that turn the world into the language of the brain, and then the brain interprets it as a signal. Now the thing is, our eyes, for instance, aren't really seeing the world as it is. Our eyes only see a fraction of what's out there. Our eyes can see only 1/10,000,000,000th of what's out there in the world. Right now, from all of your pockets right now, there are cells or rays of light that go into a cell tower. Those are your mobile phones. And they're real in the sense that you can actually use a device to get them, but they're also not real because you don't really know where they are. You can't really see them or feel them. You can pass your hands, they go through your body, you don't really know where they are. We have to build devices that sense them. But if there were a bat in this room right now, the bat would actually see them using its echolocating ears. The bat would actually know where the rays of light that come from pockets are, and it would fly between them. Because for the bat, this is reality. So every organism in nature has a different lens on reality. Humans see part of it, bats see a different part, snakes see a third part. Snakes have in their eyes what's known as heat peats. So they basically see the world as like blobs of red and blue. So they don't see your faces, but they see that there's a lot of red things here which they can charge on, and a lot of blue things here that they cannot touch. That's how they see the world. And other animals like birds have in their brain a magnet that actually senses the magnetic fields of Earth, so they know exactly when they're flying directly to the north by just sensing it. And nature is full of other devices that all kind of sample aspects of the world. But interestingly, all of those devices then change the world into the same language of the brain and the brain of all animals. Bats, snakes, humans, amoeba, mice, birds. They all have the same language inside their head. Which means that maybe, in theory, we can take the eyes of the bat and plug them into the brain of a human and see if humans can learn to see all those rays of light that aren't there right now. Now, this seems like science fiction, but actually, in the last couple of years, we've been playing just with that, in taking people and giving them senses that they lost, and enhancing humans' visibility of senses that they didn't have before. If you lost your hearing at some point in the last 10 years, if your ears at some point worked, and then they stopped working for some reason, but your brain is still intact, doctors can actually give you a device known as the cochlear implant, which is a device that you put next to your ear. It replicates the way the ears work by sensing molecular vibrations in the air, and it plugs on the other side into your brain, where it just blasts signals in the brain, and presumably would make you hear. Now, when doctors built this device for the first time, they said it's never going to work because we don't know how to make sure that the device plugs into the right place in the brain. But what they did is they still did it. They still took a human and put a device in his brain and waited. And what they saw was that within roughly 7 months, the brain of a person relearns how to hear. The device goes in different locations of the brain, but the brain learns to adapt to the device, and within 7 months, a person that lost their hearing regains their hearing. It's a different hearing, it comes from a different device, and it goes in different locations of the brain, but it feels the same for the person. Similarly, in Los Angeles right now, there's a clinical trial where they're trying to give sight to blind people. So you lost your sight because your eyes don't work. We give you 2 cameras that sample the world the way the eyes do. They turn it into the language of the brain, and after a few weeks, people already start seeing colors and shapes and orientations, and they start getting their sight back. Now, I'm not really a religious person, but as far as I remember, the last guy who gave sight to the blind was defined as God by many people. And in many ways, this is the realm we're playing. We're taking things that were lost and giving them back to people. But these are things that already existed and were lost. The question that people asked was, can you enhance? Can you give someone a sense that they did not have? And the first example came from a study with monkeys a few years ago, where a scientist in Pittsburgh took a monkey, tied its right arm in the back, put electrodes in the monkey's brain in the part of the brain that controls the arm, and put a robotic arm just in front of it. So right now the monkey, when it tries to do something, it thinks the thoughts that would move its own arm. The arm is tied, so it can't move it, but the thoughts are transferred to the robotic arm that then moves instead of his own arm. So they put a marshmallow in front of the monkey marshmallow is there, the monkey tries to reach for the marshmallow, thinks the thoughts that would grab the marshmallow, and the robotic arm takes the marshmallow and feeds the monkey. So the first few trials, the monkey just thinks a thought and gets fed by the robotic arm from its own mind. And after a few trials, the monkey kind of gives up on trying to even move its own biological arm, and it just learns to control the robotic arm with its mind. This is what came out as the main kind of result of this study. But what I find interesting, what I think you should find interesting, is what happened after the study was over. So now the monkey learned over a few days to control a robotic arm, and the study is over. They untie the monkey's organic arm, and now it can use its own arm to get the marshmallow. But to everyone's surprise, what happened was that the monkey kept thinking the thoughts that would govern the robotic arm, and it used its own arm to scratch its head. Effectively, in the course of a few days, the monkey learned to reallocate resources in his brain such that part of the brain that used to control his own arm now controls a robotic arm, and a new part controls his arm. The monkey got a third arm in the course of a few days. This is how long it takes the brain to change and regain senses. So we're now playing with all kinds of ideas of trying to take senses and feed them into animals and see how far can you go. There's a group that actually took monkeys that were colorblind and gave them colors. I mentioned to you sight and sound. We're now playing also with taking people and spending a few days and making them experts in smells by rewiring their brain such that the part of the brain that has a lot of neurons, the visual part, is actually controlling their nose, And basically, we're rewiring their brain such that they have a lot more brain for smell and a lot less brain for seeing. And what we see is that after you do that, a person can actually, within seconds, become a sommelier. Suddenly, they smell wines the same way they did before, but they can easily tell this is different than this one. They don't know what they're doing, but their brain just has a lot more capacity to distinguish between smells. And the cool stuff is that we're actually playing also with seeing how well it works, even if you do things that are not too grandiose, like plugging things into the brain, but just using existing senses to enhance capabilities. So in one of the studies that a colleague of mine did, he brought people to the lab, and he had them wear a vest that has on it many, many motors. The reason he used the vest is that skin is one of the biggest sensors we have. We have a lot of skin cells. So people come to the lab, they put this vest on them. The vest has many motors that when you turn it on, press on the body. And then the experiment looks like this. You turn the vest on. The person who sits there feels something, say, on the left side of their body. And then 2 arrows appear on the screen in front of them. And we ask them, for this feeling that you just had, do you want to go left or do you want to go right? The person says, I don't understand. What does it have to do with the feeling I had and the choice? I say, never mind, just guess if you don't know. Okay, I'm guessing left. And we give him a feedback that says, correct, you just chose the right direction. Let's try it again. We turn the vest on, the person feels something this time in the lower back, and again 2 arrows appear on the screen, and I ask them, for this feeling, do you want to go left or right? The person says, this time I want to go right. Tell him, incorrect. You lost $1. Let's try again. For about an hour, every couple of seconds, the person feels something in their body and makes decisions about whether to go left or right, and gets feedback on how to do next time. What's interesting is that people get better. After a few trials, even though we don't tell them anything about the signal, they start to find meaning in the signal, and they start saying, you know what, every time I feel something in the right side, I should go left. Every time I feel something in the left side, I should go right. Every time I feel a pain in my stomach, I should go left. They start to find meaning and actually start doing better than chance. They start to actually win money because they know something. Now here's the cool thing. Unbeknownst to them, those patterns that they feel in their body are just random patterns. They have meaning. The patterns correspond to the S&P 500, a stock exchange ticker. Basically, they feel the financial markets. And what they're doing is they're making buy and sell decisions. So they're actually buying and selling stocks based on a feeling in their body of the markets outside. Now, they don't know it. They have no idea what they're doing. They just kind of feel something and make decisions and get feedback. But what they actually get is a sense of the market. What people in trading floors in NASDAQ and in New York Stock Exchange are doing for years, learning how to find meaning in complex patterns of stocks, these guys, after 1 hour, get. They somehow use the power of the brain to find meaning in complex content to actually derive signal from noise. And they start doing better than themselves when they're investing in stocks. So the second topic that I thought is going to change everyone's mind is when we're learning exactly how to harness the power of senses in the brain, we can give you the ability to think thoughts that aren't thinking. Instead of knowing that you're solving puzzles, like knowing that you're actually investing in stocks, you just feel something and learn how to correspond with that. And the thing is, most of our brain is actually feeling and intuitions and unconscious processing. Very little of our brain is the part that we can actually control. So we're now giving people access to the majority of their brain, the part that does things for you. The second cool thing about this one is that we might actually be able to expand the type of thoughts people can think. I have a colleague, he's a professor in England, and he was born without his left hand. A birth defect made him not develop his left hand, so he doesn't have a left hand. But over the course of his life, he actually built a robotic hand for him, a prosthetic, that he can control with using his muscles. So he can actually exercise the muscles in his arm, and in doing so, he can actually move the hand and kind of get all the things you need to get from a hand. He also plugged this hand to his brain using wireless connection, so he can actually think thoughts that control his hand and move the hand itself. He can also control the hand using an application on the phone. So he can actually give you his hand, and he says, I'm going to write here, and you can control my own hand here. But the interesting thing about this guy, Michael, is that because his hand is different than your hand, he can also do things you cannot do. For instance, he can rotate his hand full circle. You cannot do it with your hand. So he can put a light bulb in one move. Just put a light bulb and circle the hand. But the interesting thing is that not only can he do things you cannot do, because he can do those things, his brain can think thoughts you cannot think. You don't have this thought in your brain, did I leave my arm moving or is it stopped right now? This is not a thought that you can experience, but he has this thought. So his brain actually has a load of new things that he can do. As we enhance senses, we're not just giving you more power, we also might give you new thinking you can think. You might think about flying with your wings that we can build for you. You might think about how do you get from place to place using different dimensions, different muscles. You might have access to more of your brain. Idea number 2, idea number 3, and the last one is one that stems from the first one, the memory, but actually opens up an entire world of interesting exploration we can do right now. And for this, I want you to participate with me. Because the third idea comes from a different research that neuroscientists were after, which is trying to understand what makes people happy. Scientists for a while were interested in happiness and tried to know what things make people happy. And they actually asked people questions, they surveyed a lot of people, and they created a ranking of about 50 things that are the things that make you happy. And those things are ranked on a scale of 1 to 10. So you know what's the most happy thing, the second most, the third most, even to the things that are the least. And I wanted to first help me by guessing. I wanted to hear, saying, what do you think are the, say, top 5 things that make people happy? Food, not correct. Music, kindness, so far not true, but I think I heard someone saying social network, which is actually one of the top 5. It's number 2. Sex, not in the top 5, but in the top 10 though. What'd you say? Love, no. Family, no. Sleep? Wait, okay, so okay, I guess I had to orchestrate it. This is a rehearsal for the AMA, how to kind of ask questions so I can hear them. Let me list them from the bottom to the top one. And I think I even heard that the 2 top one said. Number 5 on the happiness scale, and this is again just survey, so we're not sure if it's true, it's just people think that this is what makes them happy, is volunteering. So doing things for others seems to make us happy. Turns out that even if you're depressed and you do something for others and you don't feel like you want to do something for others before, when you come back, you will feel happy yourself. So you just buy happiness for cheap helping others. In fact, there's research that shows that if I give you $10 and tell you, buy something for yourself, or if I give you $10 and say, buy something for others, you're going to actually be happier if you buy something for others. Most people say before, no, I'd rather keep the money for myself, but if they did it, if they actually bought something for others, they will feel happier afterwards. So volunteering and others is number 5 out of the top 5. Number 4. Surprising that no one said that because you all will think, oh, of course, exercising. Exercising is actually just releasing the right hormones in our brain that makes us feel happy, makes us feel euphoria. Doing sports, physicality actually makes our brain feel that we're engaged with tasks and we're just feeling happy. Okay, those are 5 and 4. Number 3. Number 3 is interesting, I think, and it ties, I think, to number 2 as well. Number 3 is being spiritual. Being religious, believing that there's meaning to life, believing that there's something bigger than just you, is actually correlated highly with being happy. Now, the trick thing here is that if you don't believe this thing, it's really hard to manufacture it. You can't say, okay, it makes me happy, I'm going to feel that now that I have meaning. It doesn't work. You have to actually believe it. But if you do believe it, you actually are going to be much happier. The jump between number 3 and number 4 is much higher than 5 and 4. Presumably, the belief among scientists is that the reason for that is that something about feeling that there's meaning to life and feeling that there's actually some person on a white cloud that looks at you means that we never feel alone. We always feel that there's someone with us. And this ties to number 2, which is being with people is one of the most important things for happiness. It doesn't matter if you like them. It doesn't matter what they contribute. Just interacting with other people. In fact, depression many times is manifested by people wanting to be alone, and that's one of the biggest flaws of depression. If you think about a lot of the world, being alone is something that the brain hates so much that it actually creates all kinds of hallucinations when you're alone. In research, historical, about loneliness, one of the interesting results was people that were in prison in Alcatraz, the biggest and safe and most secure prison in San Francisco, where the worst people on earth were locked together. If they behaved badly, they were put in solitary confinement. So if you're with all the murderers and rapists and villains of the world, and you behave badly, they take you and put you alone, which is strange, right? You're the worst people on earth, but still being alone with your own mind is regarded a worse punishment. In that sense, being alone is one of the worst things you can do to the brain. So we got the last 5: volunteering, sports, spirituality, social interactions. Number 1, by far above all the others. And if you can choose just one, do just that. Number 1 is sleep. Turns out that of all the things you can do to make yourself happy, sleeping better is the number 1 thing. Now, it's unclear if it's correlation or causation. It's unclear if people that are happy sleep better, or people that sleep better are happy. But what we know is that sleeping better makes you, on many other things, feel happy. Even if we tell you to do things that you don't like, after you slept well, they seem much better. They ask people, how would you like to go get a root canal? After a good night's sleep, people said, I would like to get it right now. That's how good sleep is. Now the thing is, it's not about the quality, not about the amount of sleep, it's about the quality of sleep. So those of you who have kids, it's not the end of the world. You can still get happy, because it's about the quality. If you can get good quality sleep in 6 hours, it's good enough. Some of you might sleep 9 hours, but still wake up very, very tired. Not good. The point is to find out how to sleep well. And this will get me to the third point, which is the most, I think, novel idea that we're exploring right now in our labs. And that is how to actually use sleep as a resource. So I can talk for a while about how to sleep better, what sleep means, what happens in sleep, and so on. But one of the interesting things that we learned in the last couple of years is that sleep isn't the moment where your brain is shut down. The opposite. Your brain is actually overworking when you sleep. It burns a lot of calories. It actually thinks a lot of things when you sleep. It solves problems when you sleep. It comes up with insights. And it also dreams. And what we learned in the last 5 years is that if we target specific moments in your sleep, we can actually activate your brain and make your brain do things for you when you're not there to guard it. So your guards are down. You're not there to stop things from happening. So we can do things that will change your brain when you sleep. I mentioned earlier that memories change as we use them. A group at Northwestern have been looking at basically making your brain reactivate memories when you sleep and changing them such that when you wake up, you already have a different memory of an event, particularly bad one. So you have a trauma, you go to sleep, we play with your memories when you sleep, and when you wake up, you have less of that trauma. Now, in the same idea, we can now also change your behavior altogether. A group at Cambridge took people who were smokers, had them go to sleep, and during the night when they were sleeping, they targeted the part of your brain that makes you desire the smoking and change something so when you wake up, you don't want to smoke anymore. People don't know why. They just go to sleep and they wake up and they suddenly don't feel like smoking for a few days. It doesn't last longer. It goes back after a few days. We don't know yet why, but that's the next question. And with the same idea, people have been looking at changing behaviors, making you eat healthy, making you become less racist, maybe you become a little bit more open to other ideas when you sleep. All kinds of cool ideas that all come from changing your brain when you're not there to defend it. And the coolest thing that I think I'm going to leave you for the AMA is that we also realized, as we started exploring what happens in your brain when you sleep, that we can get to your memories, understand what they mean, decode them, and gradually write into them. So dreams, which were kind of like a movie that happened to us when we were sleeping and no one really knew what they meant, became something that we can now access, change, understand, and essentially give you a read of a part of your life that is almost always blank to you. You forget it as soon as you wake up, and it might be interesting to know what it is. Changing memories, understanding how they work, creating a bigger perception of the world around us by adding senses, and accessing the vault in our brain that comes to life when you go to sleep are 3 ideas from the last 5 to 10 years that not only give us understanding of the brain, but actually open up a world of possibilities, a canvas of opportunities for people to really understand themselves better. And the idea behind that is that now we can actually choose how we want to experience life because we understand more the building blocks of life itself. Thank you.